Hi, welcome today to our show, The Real Road to Recovery. I am your host, Miriam Trimble, and my guest today is a wonderful, amazing woman of God. Her name is Valerie L. Lawson Watkins, and she has an amazing recovery story to share with all of you. Just to give you a little bit of background, Valerie was born in the city of Kinston, North Carolina, and her parents were Daniel and Bertrina Lawson. She is the only daughter of 5 sons. Wow. You survived that. But she gave her heart to the Lord at a very young age, and I think that's amazing. Just the spiritual leadership that she has grown into under her. Her father was Reverend in a revival in a little country church, and just you graduating in from college at the age of 21. I mean, you started really early with your where God is leading you into ministry, and you found that right away. And I think that's amazing. So after attending college in East Orange, New Jersey for fashion and merchandising, she returned back to Bridgeport, Connecticut, and she assisted her older brother, Bishop Lionel Lawson, to start his first church. So I want to hear all about the ministries that you have lined up, but I was really impressed with all the, even though God's using you in women's ministry, youth camps, intercessory groups, grief counseling, being a coordinator, you're an advisory board for HIV and AIDS. Like, I want to hear more about that. I think just having that support center, that's not something that a lot of people have that in a ministry. And I think that you have an amazing opportunity to reach those ones that are hidden and don't get an opportunity to talk about that. So can you tell us a little bit what brought you to that point where you wanted to be an advocate for HIV and AIDS?
I sure can. Thank you so much. And thank you. It's a privilege and an honor to share and to be on your program this afternoon. Thank you so much, Margaret. HIV became a part of my life, not because I asked it to be a part of it, but because it was invited into my life, into our life, because of my father. Back in 1994, I should say 1993, my father was diagnosed with AIDS. And that was something that was not heard of during that time period. It was heard of, but not in our community. It was heard of in the quote unquote gay population, gay community. And the only time that we heard about it was when Arthur Ashe, the African-American tennis player, contracted it from a blood transfusion. But it entered our lives through my father when he got diagnosed because he had gone to the hospital because of shingles. And my parents were separated at that time. And my mom was evangelizing, and the doctors called our family together to let us know that my father had gone into the hospital for shingles, but he was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS at that time. And during that time, they did not test your sexual partners because they would have right away tested my mom, but they didn't do that. So my father was released from the hospital. My mom started taking care of him, would go to his room. He was renting a room and would take care of him in between her revivals, evangelizing. And 6 months later, my mom was away running revival, and she started with the symptoms of pneumonia, a cold. And when she got back to Connecticut where she was living at the time, where we all were living, my brother, who was the pastor and who was the first Black clergy over a HIV/AIDS community center, picked my mom up from the airport and took her to the center and had her tested. And that's where we found out that my mom was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS at the time. So that's how HIV AIDS became part of our lives.
Sorry. But since then, you said your mom was already in the middle of a revival, and she wasn't, even though she wasn't feeling well. I mean, she didn't know she had contracted it, but she was continuing on with the mission.
Yes, she
And
was.
I feel like that's exactly what you're doing. You're carrying on the mission. You said you began a not one of your nonprofit organization is No Sad Story Ministries. And I think that what was birthed from pain and trauma, God did something great from that.
Yes,
And I would love to hear a little bit about your mission statement.
yes.
Can you share?
Yes, most definitely. From that point, my mom passed my father passed December the 7th, 1994, and my mom passed December the 4th, 1996. And in 1988, Stevie Wonder got a worldwide commission that World's AIDS Day was established in December the 1st. And both of them passed. How ironic. Both of them passed in December. So we definitely recognize December 1st as World's AIDS Day along with the world. And No Sad Story was established October of 2014 in honor of my mom. And we carry on that legacy. And what we do is advocate and we support and serve the HIV/AIDS community because of the stigma that goes along with the HIV/AIDS diagnosis. It's not a death sentence. It's actually a life sentence because you can live. If you can live, you can buy, you can strive, you can thrive with that diagnosis because of the discovery of medicines and therapy and all of the support that goes along now with the diagnosis. You can live and you can thrive. And a lot of times, if you don't tell anyone that you are living with HIV, no one would ever know. So I am so thankful that I can carry on that legacy and reinforce the legacy and the lifestyle that my mom lived until she passed. And when you would ask her how she was doing, she would always say, "No sad story." So the story of those that are living with HIV, you can say the same, no sad story.
That is awesome. I love where that came from because she didn't want people to feel sorry for her. She didn't want to feel sorry for herself.
Right.
She was like, this might have happened to me, but I'm still going to continue on to the purposes of what God's doing. And I love that you're carrying on her legacy. And I see that you're keeping her last name, Lawson, alive.
Yes.
And that's great that you can minister to those. Like you said, people haven't talked about that, and they're afraid. And it's not a death sentence, even with some of the other diagnoses out there, medical diagnoses for cancer or whatnot. But it's what you do, your attitude, taking the medications, catching it early, detecting it early. And like you said, the most important thing that you said was the support.
Right.
And the prayers and the support and just coming alongside them. So I'm just so excited that you're here. We are going to take a quick break, but I want to come back and hear about your other nonprofit. I want to hear a little bit about the awakening for unmasking the domestic violence, because I think a lot of people also hide in the shadows with that as well. And it needs to get out there. And I love what you're doing in the community, what you're doing to help women and even men too, So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about your story, but we will take a quick commercial break.
80% of women will develop a pelvic health condition at some point in their lives. There is relief. There is hope. The Pelvic Floor Store, your resource for personal health.
Hi, welcome back. I am Miriam Trimble. I am your host, to the Real Road to Recovery on WYTV7. And today, our guest, we were talking earlier about the commemorative day of December 1st that's coming up. It's the World's AIDS Day. And I really would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that for our viewers that don't know about it. Let's take a little bit more look deeper into that. Can you tell us and share a little bit more about World's AIDS Day?
I sure can. World's AIDS Day was nationally deemed as a world commemoratory day for us to remember those that have passed because of AIDS. The first stage of the disease is HIV, which is the disease that affects your immune system. Your immune system gets affected where it cannot fight off germs and diseases. And so when your immune system is affected, it gets so low, your viral load gets so low that you can't fight off germs and diseases. And so it gets attacked. And so when it gets attacked to the point where you cannot fight off other diseases and germs, then you go into the stage of full-blown AIDS. And so AIDS is the disease that actually affects your body and causes death. So on that day, we recognize and we commemorate those that have passed of AIDS. And so we come together, we pray. We, as an organization, a nonprofit organization, we actually are going to have a commemoratory service on that day at noontime. We're going to give you more details. We will have a flyer on our website and on Facebook. We're going to have a service. We're going to have speakers that are living with HIV. We're going to have lunch. We're going to have testing on that day. And let me say right now, let me pause, if you don't mind, Mary, that on that day, we are going to have testing. Testing is so important. Listeners, testing is important. If you are sexually active, you need to be tested, because whether you are married or unmarried, testing is important because you do not know what your partner is doing. And it's better to know than not to know. So go to your health department. When you are having your yearly physical, you have to ask your physician, please test me for STDs, for HIV, for hepatitis C. Test me, please include that testing in my testing while you are examining me. So,
Yes, that's absolutely, that's really important. I'm glad that you got that word out there. But can you just tell me, on your road to recovery, the Real Road to Recovery, can you just tell me some of the things that you went through? You said that your dad was sick and then your mom was taking care of him. I mean, what did you and your brothers endure through all that?
Well, seeing my dad, because my parents were separated, we didn't see my dad, of course, as much as we did my mom. So I, as the only girl, I was still a daddy's girl. I don't care how often I didn't see my dad. My dad was still here, and I was always his sugarfoot. That's what he used to call me. And when I would come to, I was married to a military guy at the time, and we lived an hour and a half away from my parents. But when I would come to visit my mom, I would go and see my dad, and I could see his failing health. My dad was going blind. My dad was losing a lot of weight. My dad had the lacerations on his skin. You could see that his appetite was leaving. He had the Meals on Wheels, and every time I would go, he would just have stacks of food where he wasn't eating. And he was going, I could see signs of dementia at the same time. And he was in his early 60s at the time. So it was a very depressing sight to see my dad. And then my mom, they were being that they were separated, my mom would actually go over and take care of my dad. And then when she was diagnosed, even though my mom contracted the disease from my dad, my mom walked in forgiveness. And my mom still went over and took care of my dad and loved on him and supported him even through that time. And so when my mom got to the point where her health was being affected at that time, she started the weight loss. She was taking 36 pills a day. 36 pills a day. She was. And she got to the point where she wasn't speaking anymore. She couldn't travel anymore. She got to the point where her appetite was leaving. She was losing her appetite. She got to the point where she was her hair. She was losing her hair. She never got the lacerations though. But then she got the symptom of where her food, E. coli. She got E. coli. E. coli is a bacteria that starts eating your bowel. So your food just goes right through you. So she wasn't able to hold her food. So that was the last symptom that was really embarrassing for her. And so she said to me, she says, when I get to the point where I can't take care of myself, she said, Valerie, stop praying for me. I want to go home to be with the Lord. And so that's where she was getting.
What a journey that your mom was still faithful and wanting to take care of your dad. And even though, like you said, it was that forgiveness, and then I'm sure you had that in your heart as well toward your dad, because I'm sure it was pretty emotional for you and your brothers. I mean, do you remember what your brothers were going through at the time as well?
My brothers were very angry with my father. My brother, three of them were angry. My youngest brother and my fourth oldest brother, they held on to my dad. They felt like it was, they were very angry because my dad didn't talk about it. My father never was verbal, didn't know how to communicate, as a lot of men don't. He didn't communicate his hurt and his pain, and we had a lot of questions. So they were more loyal and more loyal to my dad, and kind of rejected my mom type. But my other three was holding on to my mom. So it was kind of a division there. But at the end, we all came together and we celebrated my mom at the end of her days. We did. We did. And that's why I wrote the book, No Sad Story. So I wrote my mom's legacy through a book. And actually 2 weeks ago, we actually performed, the book became a play and it was performed. So it was awesome.
Oh, that's awesome that you were able to write a book about it. Can you just tell us about what the past doctors have known? Can you tell us what the doctors kind of share with the disease of HIV? Because a lot of us don't know.
Yes, well, like right now, there's been a lot of discovery, a lot of positive and a lot of scientific discoveries about the disease, but there has been no cure as of yet. But now patients those that are living with HIV are down to one pill. So HIV is not a death sentence, and I will definitely say to our listeners, please get tested. Please get tested. Please use protection. If you're sexually active, please use protection because there's a lot of it out there. Go to your health department, your doctors, and use protection and get tested because you need to know now better than later.
Absolutely. And Valerie, thank you for coming on Real Road to Recovery and just sharing that story and reaching out to the community, reaching out to our viewers, because they need to be informed, they need to be educated. And I thank you so much for being my guest today.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And if you would like to be a guest on Real Road to Recovery, you can reach me at wytv.org/contacts and look for me under Real Road to Recovery. And I'd love to have you on our show. Until next time, have a good night.